Good afternoon. Welcome to another exciting edition of Reading with Mr. Eble. Grenade. So we're going to continue reading. We're going to be going through pages 125 to 138. So this chapter is about Hideki, and it's called Run. Banzai! The Japanese lieutenant yelled as the soldiers and refugees streamed outside. Hideki didn't want to die. Shigetomo's Maboi took over, and Hideki ducked the lieutenant's bamboo stick and fled deeper into the cave. "You, get back here, you coward!" the lieutenant cried, raised his pistol, and pulled the trigger. The sound of the lieutenant's gun was so loud in the little cave that Hideki was sure he'd been shot. He flinched and stumbled to the ground, scuffing his knees, but he wasn't shot. The bullet had missed him. Heart pounding, Hideki scrambled to his feet and snatched up the sack with the Emperor's photos, but there was nowhere to run. The front entrance was the only way in or out of the cave. Hideki's breath came hard and quick as he backed away. The lieutenant's eyes were wide with madness. He aimed the gun at Hideki again. Hideki's eardrums were so damaged that the sound was muted now, but he felt the sting of the bullet as it grazed his arm. It burned white hot, like touching a pot that had been too long over the fire. He cried out, his own voice muffled to him. The sound of the gunshots had hurt the lieutenant's hearing too. He winced, closing his eyes and holding his ears. In moments, Hideki knew the lieutenant would recover and take another shot. Hideki searched desperately for some way to escape. The air shafts! These man-made caves had air vents cut into them, leading up to the surface. While the lieutenant still had his eyes closed, Hideki slipped the string of the sack of photos around his neck and scrambled up a hill of dead bodies and into the air shaft above him. There weren't many places to hang on, but he managed to wedge his knees against the hard rock to hold himself in place. The sack weighed him down, and he struggled to climb, his knees barking in pain, his arm burning and bleeding. Hideki looked down, worried that the lieutenant was going to appear underneath him any moment. But the lieutenant must not have seen him climb into the airshaft. He cried out in surprise, demanding Hideki come out from wherever he was hiding. That gave Hideki a panicky few seconds to claw himself higher. Just as his hand found the wooden frame at the top of the shaft, he heard the lieutenant cry out again. He'd spotted Hideki. He was looking right up the airshaft. The lieutenant yelled something at him, something Hideki's ringing ears couldn't understand. Hideki heaved himself out of the shaft as another bullet from below hit the wooden frame, showering him with splinters. But he was free. Hideki crawled out onto a hilltop, studded with broken tree stumps. There was no chance the tall lieutenant could follow him up the shaft. Hideki himself had barely fit, and the entrance to the cave was nowhere nearby. He was safe, for now. His limbs near useless, ears still pounding, Hideki rolled into one of the water-filled craters that pitted the ground. As he lay, half submerged, he began to cry again. Great racking sobs he couldn't control. Hideki cried for the Okinawans he'd watched get strapped with explosives. He cried for the Japanese soldiers who lay dying in the cave. He cried out of sheer exhaustion. He even cried for the awful lieutenant. Hideki cried until he had no more tears to shed, and then the Okinawan sky cried for him, raining down its own cold tears. His father was right. Okinawa was a Sut Ishi, a sacrificial stone, just like the Blood and Iron Student Corps. The Japanese army had sent him and the other boys out to fight against an experienced, well-equipped American killing machine with nothing more than a few days' training and 2 grenades each. They expected them to die. The Japanese army didn't care about protecting Okinawa or its people. All they cared about was buying themselves enough time to defend their own islands. Hideki's face burned hot with anger and shame. He'd believed everything they told him, swallowed all their insults and lies, and for what? Hideki picked up the sack with the image of His Majesty the Emperor of Japan and flung it away with a scream, picture frame spilling out into the mud. Hideki was done, finished. There's nothing left to fight for, and certainly nothing left to die for. He would find a squad of American soldiers and surrender to them, just like the leaflets had told him. Hideki trudged down the other side of the hill, slipping and sliding in the muck. He spotted American soldiers up ahead, clearing a cave. Hideki froze, watching in horror as the Americans fired a flamethrower through the cave's tiny entrance. They hadn't even checked to see if it was soldiers or civilians inside. One American soldier spotted Hideki and pointed. He yelled something. Suddenly, the other soldiers turned and aimed their guns right at him. "No, wait!" Hideki cried. Another American with a huge gas tank on his back turned on Hideki with wild eyes, blazing, crazy eyes, like the ones Hideki had seen on the lieutenant in the cave. Liquid flame spurted out from the nozzle of the American's flamethrower. Hideki was far enough away that the flames just brushed him, singeing his eyebrows and setting the front of his uniform on fire. He stumbled backward into the mud, desperately patting out the flames. Bullets buzzed like mosquitoes in his ears, and he turned and ran. They were all monsters, the Japanese and the Americans. He zigged and he zagged, trying to escape the evil spirits, just like his father had taught him. Hideki didn't know where he was or where he was going. He just knew he never wanted to see another American soldier again as long as he lived. Next chapter is about Ray. It's called Run. The Japanese were coming. Me and Barbecue will take the first wave, Big John yelled. New guy Zimmer, you're the second team. You fire while the first team reloads. Got it? Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes. Ray took aim through the sights of his rifle. At first, he was looking at great mountains and blue sky. And then suddenly, there was a dirty green helmet and then the face of a Japanese soldier, his eyes wide with surprise at seeing Ray and his rifle team. Ray raised himself up on his elbows and fired his M1. The soldier fell backward down the slope. There's no time to think, no time to do anything but shoot again and again, as Japanese soldier after Japanese soldier tried to get high enough on the ridge to shoot them back. I'm almost out, Ray yelled. His clip was spent, but there was another soldier in his sights. Ray flinched as Zimmer took him down. Reload, reload, Big John yelled at him. Ray ejected his rifle's spent clip and scrambled for a new one from the pouches on his belt. He had another loaded and ready to go, just in time for him and Big John to take over for Zimmer and the new guy when they ran out. The Japanese kept coming, and Ray kept shooting. He had to. How long had they been at this? It felt like hours, but Ray knew it had to be only minutes. His arms and shoulders ached. I'm running low on ammo, the new guy yelled. Ray was low too. They all had to be. They didn't have an unlimited supply of bullets and grenades. Then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The Japanese soldiers stopped coming, and Ray breathed a huge sigh of relief and checked his watch. The whole counterattack had lasted no more than 15 minutes. Hey, you guys still alive? Big John asked. Just barely, Zimmer called back. The new guy was alive too. Everything was still quiet. The American mortars weren't firing because they didn't want to hit any Marines left alive on the ridge, and for some reason, the Japanese mortars hadn't started up again. The silence was almost more frightening than the attack. Ray knew some Japanese soldier was out there right now with his rifle trained on the very place he was hiding, just waiting for Ray to peek out. Now what do we do? Ray asked. Hang on, somebody's coming, Big John told him. Another ground attack? Ray checked his ammunition. He only had 2 clips left. That was just 16 bullets. They weren't going to be able to hold out much longer. Same pairs as before, Big John said, his voice hard. When we're out, we're out. We make a run for it. The top of a head rose on the Japanese side of the saddle, and Ray took careful aim with his rifle. His finger tightened on the trigger as he waited for the soldier's eyes. But it wasn't a soldier, it was an Okinawan woman. And there were more of them, women, children, old men, refugees, dozens of them coming up the hill toward the saddle between the ridges. But why here? Why now? The woman closest to Ray had on the most beautiful dress Ray had ever seen. It was covered with white flowers, white like fluffy clouds on a sunny summer day in Nebraska. Ray froze, the woman floating in front of him like some kind of vision. Who was she? What was she doing here? In the middle of a firefight? How in the world had she kept that blue dress so clean when everything else was covered in mud? The woman was sobbing, Ray noticed, and she held a baby in her arms. With sudden horror, Ray understood why these people were here, now in the middle of a battlefield. The woman had dynamite strapped around her waist. The Japanese were using Okinawans as human bombs. Shoot! Shoot them before they get too close, Big John roared. Zimmer and the new guy fired, their fear overcoming their discipline. But Ray was frozen. He couldn't do it. The woman in the beautiful blue dress staggered closer, closer, her arms wrapped tight around her baby, protecting him from the monsters in their world. Barbecue! Barbecue! Big John yelled, trying to snap him out of it. Ray could already feel his rifle lowering. He couldn't shoot the woman. He wouldn't. So Big John did it for him. Ray's skin glowed hot from the blast. He felt fuzzy-headed, dazed, like he did when he had the flu. He tried to shake it off, to come back to his senses. My rifle's overheating, Zimmer cried. It was too hot for him to hold. Ray, we need your help, man, Big John called. Come on, Majors, Zimmer yelled. Soon as Zimmer said it, time stopped. Big John froze mid-reload, his eyes wide. Ray's mind cleared like a fog lifting, and his heart quit mid-beat. Zimmer had called him Majors on the battlefield. The moment broke like lightning. Japanese rifles and machine gun tracers mowed down the Okinawans from behind and pelted the ridgeline. The Japanese poured everything they had at the saddle between the hills, and then a grenade landed right between Ray's legs. Run, get out of here, Big John roared. Ray launched himself from the saddle. He dove behind a tree stump as the grenade exploded behind him. He tumbled head over heels down the hill. He landed with a crunching thud, his ears ringing from the nearness of the blast, his helmet gone. He didn't know if Big John or Zimmer or the new guy were still alive. He didn't turn around to find out. Ray staggered to his feet and ran straight and low and fast, just like Sergeant Meredith had told him. He didn't know where he was or where he was going. He just knew he never wanted to see another Japanese soldier again as long as he lived. Next chapter is called Boom. Hideki ran. He dodged shattered trees, leaped over corpses, ducked mortar explosions. He was close to the front line. He could tell from the gunfire the explosions that shook the earth. He knew he should stop, turn around, find a place to hide, but he couldn't stop himself. He was more scared than he had ever been in his entire life. He had to get as far away from the Americans as fast as he could. He had to run, had to keep going. There was no going back, only going forward. Ray ran. He dodged shattered trees, leaped over corpses, ducked mortar explosions. He was getting farther from the front line. He could tell from the distant gunfire the dull thud of the explosions. He knew he should stop, turn around, rejoin his company. But he couldn't stop himself. He was more scared than he had ever been in his entire life. He had to get as far away from the Japanese as fast as he could. He had to run, he had to keep going. Stay low, don't bunch up, run like hell. Hideki crested a low hill and slid down the other side. He'd run too far without zigging, too far without zagging, too far straight ahead. At the bottom of the hill, he changed direction and took a hard right turn, running straight for a stunted little pine tree that had miraculously escaped all the shells falling on the island. He ran left around the tree. Ray slid down a low hill and struggled up the other side. He'd run zigzag too far, like a chicken trying to escape a fox. At the top of the hill, he stopped dodging back and forth and ran straight ahead toward a stunted little pine tree that had miraculously escaped all the shells falling on the island. He ran right around the tree. Hideki slammed into someone, bigger and stronger, running the other way. It's like running headlong into a stone wall, and he landed with a splurch in the mud. Ray hit somebody small and fast coming the other way around the tree. The boy's helmet hit him right in the gut like a punch in the stomach, and he fell back into the mud with a splurch. Hideki was dazed for a moment, but when he shook off his surprise, he found himself staring at a young man wearing an American soldier's uniform. Ray was equally dazed. When he got his breath back, he found himself staring at a young boy wearing a Japanese soldier's uniform. A moment passed, and an eternity of shock and fear condensed into the single beat of a heart. They both scrambled back away from each other. Ray fumbled for his rifle. Hideki scrambled for a grenade. Ray raised his rifle from the mud. Hideki struck the fuse on his grenade. Ray squeezed the trigger of his M1. Hideki threw his grenade. The blast threw Ray and Hideki back into the mud, and knocked them both out cold. So we'll stop there. That's the end of part 1. We'll start part 2 tomorrow. So thanks for tuning on in. If you missed any of the chapters, we're going to post them up on our YouTube channel, as well as other books that I've read throughout distance learning. So feel free to check that out. You can click on playlists, and all the books are listed there. So have a wonderful rest of the day. And remember, Rangers the way.